Hi Lewis, how's it guys?
Welcome to today's Wealth WOD. We're doing the next part of the map process.
Is this lopsided?
It's a bit lopsided.
Okay, sorry.
A bit lopsided?
It's wonky, sorry.
Sorry guys. So the map process, so how to select the right investment property is a process of elimination. So the map process is knocking out markets that aren't good at that point in time, leaving only desirable markets to invest in, then knocking out areas, so M, A, P, and P finally being the property itself.
So let's recap it guys. Where it came from was that we'd meet with all these people, accountants, consultants, lunches, bottles of wine, the whole lot, but no one would actually sit us down and say, here's the best way for you to pick the market you'd like your property to be in. So after years and years of us throwing ideas around, we created a map, and we're going to talk today, as Cam said, high level, number one, top one, M for map, market.
Yeah.
So, sorry.
No, Rupinder, what we'll do is we'll just, as Al said, we'll go through high level and then we'll break down of each of these points in the coming WODs, and we'll go into specifics on how you can assess each one of those.
It's a pretty long list, guys. We've just grabbed 5 or 6 of the top ones, I guess, but first one we look at is the last 2 years worth of growth that any city's actually had.
Yeah, and I'll do a developer's activity chain, probably one of the next WODs, which will explain to you why it's really important and how you can identify the time when it's not good to invest in any market. This is a really good one for you to remember.
Yep. Population growth versus supply in the market.
So I always look at population growth forecasts in the 4 major capital cities, and I match that with the amount of affordable housing on the market. And in particular, I understand the amount of affordable housing that's coming onto the market through the major developers, being medium and high-rise apartment developers and broadacre land subdividers.
And we'll go into it, but we delve pretty deep here, guys. It's birth rates, it's immigration rates, it's government visa policy. There's a whole spectrum there that we can talk about. We'll talk about in future WODs.
Sure.
What else we got?
Employment stats and a solid performing economy, and the economies do vary in the different capital cities.
Yep.
Employment rates is a good one for me. A lot of people talk about when's a market good, and they look at clearance rates, auction clearance rates. Clearance rates to me, they don't show a supply issue within any market. What they show is consumer confidence. Auctions happen usually around the middle or inner ring suburbs, so they don't give a true indication of an entire market on the amount of supply in a capital city market. What it does give you though is when the economy is good in an individual city, and economies in the 4 major capital cities work very differently. Melbourne and Sydney have got a lot of business activity that spurs the economy, whereas Brisbane and Perth, their tourism economy, so they got knocked around pretty hard following the GFC, where Melbourne and Brisbane went fairly well. The reality is, when the local economy is good, people feel secure, the employment rates are good, people feel secure in their jobs, they buy houses.
Too true.
Al's acquisition team, so he's got a team that basically go out and they assess the stats in each capital city market. And he looks at a macro level, first of all, with any city market and the reports he gets, and I'm probably privileged that I can take advantage of the resource that his team provides there. What are some of the things you look for in a macro level across a capital city?
Yeah, so I guess it's infrastructure is the moment we're talking about here. So government level, macro level infrastructure that's going to impact not just one local area, because infrastructure also comes into the A of the map process, but at a market level, the infrastructure, where the government's spending money, upcoming projects, job creation, which goes back to the point Cam made before. But what we find is where the government's spending a lot of money in infrastructure, what the government's really trying to do is kickstart the economy. So they're not going to do it when the economy's booming. We've seen in Brisbane in recent years, the government spent a fortune on new roads and bridges and tunnels just to put some money back in the economy and get things moving again. Yeah. What that tells us is that there's a period of time, maybe a lag, once there's more money in the economy, the workers have more money, the workers are spending more money, and there's a flow on through the economy, which eventually leads into the housing market and pushes the prices up. So at a macro level, as well as at an area level, we're looking at infrastructure changes in any given market.
Policy changes, I know, is one that that you guys get into as far as budgeted infrastructure, unbudgeted infrastructure, policy changes on the type of density and things like that they get into.
Yeah, so that's a really good one. So, I mean, if I use Melbourne as the example here, guys, right now every city council in Melbourne is going through a process of determining what new neighbourhood zones they're going to use. So it'll be neighbourhood, growth zone, high growth zone. We also have things like the urban growth boundaries that at times can make a massive impact into local property prices and markets, up and down. So if you're an investor and you've got a property where there's about to be a change to the growth boundary, well, guess what, there's some more stock available that might delay the growth you're going to experience any given time.
So just on growth boundaries, it's important, when you talk about urban growth boundaries, a lot of people think the outer brink of our capital cities, so where city meets the country basically. The big thing people forget with urban growth boundaries and the change in policy around urban growth boundaries is the majority of impact on the amount of supply in a city happens between low density and medium to high density. So especially the way, we've obviously seen being over in China recently, the impact that our activity centres, urban growth boundaries are changing, which is going to allow that huge influx and amount of supply coming up around those activity centres as opposed to and trying to offset the population growth.
Yeah, that's a great point, Cam, because like you said, if you can be investing in property where there's going to be these activity centres popping up, guess what? It's driving all those fundamentals we've talked about already today into that local area, making almost a little city and a little hub that creates its own mini economy, growing prices.
So guys, I suppose what we wanted to point out today, we're going to go through each of these points and go in a lot more depth on each of these points and teach you how you can identify with the resources that you've got as best possible to knock out the capital cities that aren't ideal for investment at that point in time, which will hopefully leave you one or two of those capital cities that are good at each point in time, rather than the tongue-in-cheek WOD we did the other day, which was Al throwing a dart at the dartboard or literally just going to the local real estate agent. So there's got to be more strategy if you want to duplicate your portfolio and grow wealth at a much faster rate.
Happy WODing!
See you guys.